Hello and welcome to the introduction of the Building an E-Learning course with Camtasia Studio 8 video course. I'm Joe Deegan, and after 9 years of creating hundreds of screencasts and training videos used for e-learning courses, I've learned a few lessons that'll help you successfully build e-learning courses using Camtasia Studio 8. In this section, we'll get things started by introducing you to what you'll learn, and I'll give you some tips that'll help you make the most out of this course so that you can be sure you're ready to create effective e-learning courses using Camtasia Studio 8 upon completion of the course. Camtasia Studio is a great tool that makes it easy for teachers, corporate trainers, and subject matter experts to create interactive videos and screen recordings for e-learning courses, or as performance support resources for instructor-led courses. In this course, we'll go beyond the basics and you'll learn how to overcome challenges specific to e-learning. Whether you're using it to train employees, educate students, or support customers, this video course will teach you what you need to know to create effective e-learning courses using Camtasia Studio 8. Specifically, you'll learn how to navigate and access useful features in Camtasia Studio 8, plan your e-learning project by creating storyboards and configuring project settings, use fundamental features such as title clips, transitions, importing media clips and recording audio, record and edit screencasts to add a professional look and feel, capturing lectures and presentations so that they can be viewed online or within e-learning courses, adding interactivity with quizzes and hotspots, publishing your project so that it's easily accessible by your students on a website or through a learning management system such as Moodle or Blackboard, and finally some extra tips that will help you take your courses to the next level. This course consists of several sections that can be completed in order if you're looking for a more complete education on Camtasia. If you're already familiar with Camtasia and are looking for specific information, you can go ahead and jump straight to the video that meets your needs. We'll start out by introducing you to Camtasia and its overall potential, then we'll dig deeper into how to use its features to create compelling content for your e-learning courses. In each section, I'll provide demonstrations and examples that will give you an idea of the potential of Camtasia and how it can be used to suit your needs. On the course site, you'll also find example files that you can download and use to follow along with each lesson. Along with the screen recordings in each section, I'll also recommend specific practice activities that will help you retain the information being covered. The practice activities can be completed using the example files available to be downloaded, or you can start from scratch by creating your own Camtasia project. Completing the practice activities is crucial to truly understanding the information being covered, so make sure to not skip them at the end of each video. So let's dig into it and get started with a tour of Camtasia Studio 8 so that you're familiar with the features available and how to access them. If you don't have much experience with video editing software, it can be difficult to get started, but this next section will help you to take the first steps towards creating an e-learning course using Camtasia. In the last video, we went through what will be covered in this course. This video gives you an overview of an e-learning project example with practice activities provided to help you follow along with each task covered in this course for effectively using Camtasia's features in the workflow to build an e-learning course from start to finish. I highly encourage you to download these files from the course site and learn by creating a duplicate of this project step by step as you follow the practice activities. When you download the files, you'll find the camproj file, which is the main project file that you will use to open and edit the project, several camrec files, which are the Camtasia screen recording files, as well as audio and image files that are used in the project. If you open the camproj file by double-clicking it, you'll see that all of the media files have already been imported to the clip bin. However, if you'd like to start with a blank project, you can start a new Camtasia project by opening Camtasia, then clicking File, then New Project. Once you have a new project open, you can import the camrec and other media files into the clip bin so that you're able to construct the project on your own. Some of the key features included in the example e-learning course are an embedded player with a table of contents, screen recordings with special effects like zoom and pan and callouts, as well as quiz questions including hotspots. Now I'll describe how the example course is constructed to give you a better idea of the overall process and workflow of creating an e-learning course in Camtasia. Let's start by talking about the clip bin area in the upper left, because this is where you'll start your project. The clip bin is where you'll access all of the video clips, images, or audio that you'll be using in your project. In this example project, the media files that we are using have already been imported, but if you have different media that you want to use in your project, you can import it into the clip bin by clicking the Import Media icon. Or if you want to create a new screen recording to use in your project, then you can click on the Record the Screen icon. We'll cover the details of how to use the Record the Screen feature in Section 4. As you can see, you have several tabs beneath the clip-in area such as the library, audio, and callouts that allow you to access different types of media and special effects that you can use to make your e-learning project more interactive, such as quizzes, which is available by clicking on the More tab. If you look at the timeline of the example project, you'll see that there has been callouts, markers, and a quiz already added to the timeline. Once you import any video clips or create any screen recordings, you'll be able to easily add those into your project from here in the clip-in by dragging and dropping down to the timeline. But something nice about Camtasia is that it also comes equipped with some great media that you can use to add pizzazz to your project. It's easy to access the additional media by clicking on the library icon, but it's important to keep in mind that no level of pizzazz will outweigh the quality of the content. Here in the library we have several different folders that contain different themes, backgrounds, music, animations, and other assets that can really make you look like a video editing pro. In this example project, I used title clips and callouts that are readily available in the theme folder labeled All Polished. And something I like about the library is that it makes it easy to quickly access all of these assets from any project you're working on without having to search through your computer and add it to the clip-in for each project. If there's media that you'll be using in several different projects, it's great to have it here in the library so that you can quickly access it. And you're not limited to what's available by default with Camtasia. You can also add your own media to the library so that you have it easily available when working on all of your projects. There's several more icons available here that are great for creating e-learning courses, such as quizzes and special effects, but we'll cover those in more detail in section 4. To the right of the clip-in, you'll find the Canvas or Video Preview area, and this is where you'll preview your project as you're working on it. You can click on your video in the Canvas area to resize it, position it, or even rotate it if you'd like. Underneath the canvas is the play bar, and that has your controls to play, skip forward, or skip backward. If you're trying to get to a certain segment in the video, you can scrub through the video to quickly locate it. Notice that the scrubber and the playhead on the timeline are always in sync, so you know exactly where you are in the video. To the right of the playback controls is a timecode, and that's helpful to tell you where you're at and the overall duration of the video. At the top of the canvas, you have options to change your view. For example, if I want the preview to be bigger or smaller, I can click on the Edit Dimensions menu and select the view percentage. I prefer to use the Shrink to Fit option so that it will adjust to the size of the window, allowing you to see the entire video within the canvas window. But there may be occasions where you want to use these other options to zoom in or open the video in full screen so you can see certain details. This doesn't change the size of the video when published, just the preview while you're editing it. Down at the bottom of the screen is the timeline, where the media files have been added to and edited. This is where you'll be doing most of the assembling of your project and also the editing. You'll create your project by dragging and dropping the media for your project from the clip-in down to a track in the timeline. Once it's in the timeline, you'll be able to edit and add special effects that you can see has already been done in this example course. The timeline contains separate tracks for your video clips, audio, and other graphics or special effects in your project. There's multiple tracks in your timeline so that you're able to layer video clips, callouts, or special effects. You can also add more tracks by clicking the plus button located on the upper left side of the timeline if you need to add more layers of media. And we'll cover using tracks in your timeline in more detail in section 3 when we're covering Camtasia fundamentals. At the top of the timeline is the playhead, which indicates where you're at in the project. You'll notice the playhead has a green start point and a red out point that are used to select a part of your video that you want to cut or edit in some way. To deselect an area, you can just double click the playhead. After making a selection, you can use the cut, split, copy and paste options located above the timeline to cut out or edit segments of your project. For example, if I want to cut out a part where I may have said then I can select that part and click the cut icon. But we'll cover using these options in more detail in section 4 when we discuss trimming and cutting. A nice feature of the timeline is the zoom in and out slider, which is great if you're trying to do some fine tuning to your video and want to zoom in on a certain section, or you can zoom out if you want an overall view of your entire project. This feature helps you make more precise selections, making it easier to cut out small mistakes. And that's a broad overview of the example e-learning project in the general layout and workflow in Camtasia Studio 8. In summary, the interface of Camtasia Studio is segmented into 3 areas: the clip-in, the canvas, and the timeline. The clip-in is where you'll access the media for your project, the canvas is where you'll preview the video, and the timeline is where you'll assemble the video and do your editing. Before moving on to the next section, make sure to practice by previewing the example e-learning project and taking some time to discover what's available in Camtasia. You could also start fresh with a blank project and import your own media files that you can use to edit and discover all of the great features that can be used for your e-learning projects. Now that you're familiar with the layout and workflow of Camtasia Studio, you're ready to move on to the next section where we'll discuss how to get started by planning out the details of your e-learning project. In this section, you'll learn how to plan and develop your project using a storyboard. Then in section 2, we'll go over the general workflow of developing an e-learning project with Camtasia. We'll conclude this section of the course in the third video where we'll go over how to configure project settings. Before you start recording your project, you're going to want to organize your thoughts with a storyboard or a script. If you're an instructional designer or an e-learning developer, you know that drafting a storyboard is the first step in any project to help you plan your project and also in many cases seek stakeholder approval. The perfect analogy for this is an architect creating a blueprint before construction starts on the building. A little planning up front can save you a lot of editing and redoing recordings later. So go ahead and save yourself some trouble by starting out with a storyboard, script, or at least an outline of the content you're going to cover in your Camtasia project. So let me start by telling you a little more about what a storyboard is. A storyboard is a planning document created by instructional designers to describe the visual appearance and also script out any narration for your video or e-learning course. Sometimes the visual scenes of the project will be sketched out or mocked up using programs like PowerPoint to help the designer develop the appearance of the project. And then once the storyboard is drafted, it's used as a guide for developing the course. Going back to the analogy of an architect, the storyboard could be considered the blueprint for your course. There are many different methods for creating storyboards, and if you ask 5 different instructional designers, they may show you 5 different styles of storyboards. In my opinion, it doesn't matter what program you create it in or how it's formatted. What matters is the content. Don't get too wrapped up in learning new software or formatting. Use something that allows you to focus on the instructional design. And sometimes the best way to get started with your storyboard is to step away from your computer and simply use a pen and paper. When I write a storyboard, I prefer to keep it simple with a 2 or 3 column table in a Word document. The right column is my narration script, and the column on the left is where I write out descriptions or sometimes sketch what media or interactive elements will be on the screen. On the course site, you'll find a Word document example of the storyboard template I like to use. Feel free to use this for your projects or customize it as you wish. Whether you write out your script word for word or you just summarize the main points you want to cover, this is a big help in reducing mistakes like the ums and the uhs in your narration. Some people worry about sounding too scripted or like they're reading if they use a script, but I'm sure you'll find that if you write the script in your own words, it will come off much smoother. If you are creating software training consisting mainly of screencasts, then you may not need to sketch out each scene since it will mainly be software screen recordings. But if you're creating a soft skills e-learning course with a lot of slides, then you might need to put more effort into sketching out those slides. The hard work you put in now to create the storyboard will obviously improve the results of the finished product. Once you have your storyboard complete with a script and descriptions of all the visual and interactive elements, then you'll be ready to dive into Camtasia and start building. With a well-developed storyboard, you'll find that the development phase is much more efficient because you can just focus on using the software rather than the instructional design aspect. If you're fortunate enough to have dual monitors, it's great to keep your storyboard up on one of your monitors while working in Camtasia on the other one. Or if you have a tablet device, you could consider displaying the storyboard as a PDF and positioning the tablet somewhere easy to see while recording. If you're working with a single monitor, it may be easiest to print it out so that you're able to read your script as you were recording in Camtasia. Either way, you want to make sure you try and find a comfortable spot to where you're able to clearly read your storyboard as you're recording. If you printed it out, make sure to have it laid out so that your learners don't hear you shuffling through papers in the recording. And if you're keeping it up on the monitor, make sure it doesn't require much clicking to get to it, and you definitely want to make sure it doesn't end up in the screen recording. This process of writing out your script in storyboard format also helps you rehearse and make sure that you're covering all of the important points in a logical sequence. You don't want to get to the end of the video and have to say something like, "Oh, I almost forgot about this important point." Make sure you invest the time up front to write out your script, and it can save you a lot of time in the end. The script can also come in handy if you'd like to include captions in your project for the hearing impaired. Camtasia makes it easy to automatically generate captions with a feature that allows you to import the script, which will then be converted into text captions. Now that you know how a storyboard can help you get your project started off right, go ahead and create one for a project you'd like to create in Camtasia. For the purposes of this course, try and keep it to a quick project that you can complete as you are following along with the videos in this course. The example storyboard provided on the course site can help you get started, and because it's in a Word document, you can customize it if you'd like. Then after writing out a practice storyboard, you'll be ready to move on to the next video describing the workflow for a basic project in Camtasia Studio. In this video, we'll go over the project workflow in more detail by putting together a quick example of a project using the example clips available for download from the course site. And once you have a better understanding of how to construct a project in Camtasia, we'll look at the more advanced features in later sections. The process of creating a video or e-learning course using Camtasia Studio can be summarized into 3 repeatable steps. In general, you start by importing media to your clip bin. Then the next step is to add the media to the timeline so you can edit and add any special effects. And then the last step is to preview your work in the canvas. For me, it's a process that you repeat over and over as you add more media and fine-tune your project until it's done. So let's talk about each of those steps in a little more detail. All projects usually start right here in the clip bin by importing the video clips, images, or audio that you'd like to use in your project. If you're creating something like a screen recording or recording of yourself giving a presentation, then you'll be using Camtasia's features to add that media to your clip bin. But if you have media from other sources, then you'll need to use the Import Media option to bring it into your project. I'll go ahead and get things started with step 1 by importing an example video clip that I'll use in my project. You could also import other media like images or audio, but I'm just going to keep this simple to give you a basic idea of the workflow. And you can follow along by downloading the example Camtasia project files from the course site and importing the clip titled Capture One to a blank Camtasia project. If you're using the CamProj file available on the course site, it will already have the Capture One imported as well as edited. I'd recommend starting fresh with a blank project like you see here. Now that I have a video clip imported, I'm ready to start the next step of the process by dragging and dropping the clip from the clip bin to the timeline. So I'll go ahead and drop this video clip into track 1 of the timeline. You also have several other tracks that you can use to layer in special effects like callouts or other media like images or audio. And it's important to understand that each track in the timeline is a layer, and clips or special effects that are above other items in the timeline will appear visually in front of the other clips. And we'll cover layering clips and special effects in more detail in section 4. Once you have your clips in the timeline, you're ready to move on to do some fine-tuning by trimming and cutting and adding any special effects or interactive elements for an e-learning project. We'll be covering trimming and cutting later in section 4, but let's go ahead and add a quick special effect for this example. And one of the most popular special effects are callouts, which you've seen in this video and are great for bringing attention to something in the video. If you want to make sure that your viewers notice what happens here at the 1 minute mark, then you can move the playhead to the 1 minute mark and add the arrow callout to track 2. And now that the callout is added to the timeline, you can move on to the next step of the process, which is to preview what you've created so far in the canvas. And as you can see in the canvas, because we put the arrow callout in track 2, it's now shown on top of the video clip. If you need to make sure that the arrow callout comes in at the right time, you can use the playback controls or the scrubber underneath the canvas to preview just that part of the video. This is a process that you repeat over and over until the project is done. At this point, I've completed the 3 steps of the process. From here, you can continue to work on it by adding more media or interactive elements like quizzes if it's an e-learning project. But this is just a quick example to give you an idea of the general workflow in Camtasia, so we'll save the rest of the details for sections 3, 4, and 6. The final step of the project is to publish it, which is done using the Produce and Share option that you see directly above the clip bin. You have a lot of options when it comes to publishing that we'll cover in more detail in section 7. And that summarizes the project workflow in Camtasia Studio 8. Everybody has their own methods and style for editing their projects, but when you're first getting started, it's easy to stick to these 3 steps of importing media to your clip bin, then editing it in the timeline, and lastly previewing it in the canvas. And remember that it's not a linear process. You'll need to repeat the process until your project is done. And once you get those 3 basic repeatable steps down for your first media item, the rest is just building on those 3 steps. Okay, now that you're familiar with the general process and workflow for creating a video in Camtasia, it's time to try it out for yourself. And you can feel free to use the practice files that are available for download on the course site. And you can practice what you've learned by adding some basic media and a callout to a video clip, and then you'll want to preview it in the canvas. If you're able to do that, then you can create a basic project, and you're ready to learn about the more advanced features in later sections. In the next section, you'll learn how to get your project off to a good start by configuring the project settings to your liking. In this video, you'll learn how to get your project started right by managing your files and setting the dimensions for your Camtasia Studio project. It's always a good idea to start out your project by creating a folder for the Camtasia project file and all of the individual source files for media such as video clips and audio on your computer's hard drive. That way they'll be easy to find when you're importing them into the clip bin for your Camtasia project. And depending on the project, you could have a lot of source files that your project will reference, and it's important that all of these files are nicely organized and easy to find. If you don't do a good job of keeping your files organized, then you may need to relink the files when you need to edit the project later. Now that I've got a folder on my computer's hard drive created for this project, this is where I'll want to save all of my source files and the main Camtasia project file. I'll start by saving my Camtasia project file, and to help keep things organized, I always make sure to save my project with the same name I used for this folder, so I'll go ahead and do that now. Then after you save it, you'll notice a difference in the Camtasia Studio project file, and also the Camtasia recording or other media files. The Camtasia project file is also often referred to as the camproj file, while the recording files are referred to as the camrec files. The camrec is the raw recording file. You'll never open and directly edit the camrec file. It's only referenced by the camproj file. The camproj file references the camrec and all other media files used in your project, and this is the file you'll open and use to work on your project. The camproj file is the one you will open every time you want to make edits or continue working on your project. The camproj file is the main file you use, but that doesn't mean that you can delete it or remove the camrec and other source files, because the camproj file references all of these other files and needs them in order for the project to work correctly. They're all linked together. If this link is broken between the camproj and the camrec files, you might have issues working with your project. If you have downloaded the example files available from the course site, you can see an example of how that camproj file references the camrec files. And now that I've got all my files nicely organized in a folder for my project, I'm ready to start working on it. So let's go ahead and open up the camproj file either by double clicking it or going into Camtasia and click on File, then Open. And now that I have the project open in Camtasia, we can talk about editing the dimensions of our project. One of the first things you'll need to do when starting a project is to select the dimensions or the size of the project. And the first time you add media to a project, you'll be prompted with this Editing Dimensions dialog box that will allow you to select the dimensions. It's important to be careful with what dimensions you select here, because it's not only the size you are selecting for your preview, but this is also the size it will be published at. If you expand this drop-down menu labeled Dimensions, you'll see that there are several preset sizes, which are considered standard sizes, that will help to ensure your projects will look good and play nicely, depending on how your viewers are going to be viewing it. You have a variety of standard presets that will help to ensure your video looks good for the specific device or the location that your project will be viewed from, such as on a computer or a mobile device. For this project, I'm going to choose 1280 by 720 so that it looks good when viewed full screen on a computer from the web. You can also enter custom dimensions here, but I recommend sticking to the presets so you can avoid issues like your video looking blurry or having black bars on the sides. If you do want to enter custom dimensions, make sure that this Keep Aspect Ratio box is checked to avoid those types of issues. And a nice feature you have here is the ability to change the background color of the canvas, which can be helpful if there is ever a time where you will see the background during your video. Click OK and the media will be displayed in the canvas at the size you selected. If you ever need to change the dimensions, you can click the Editing Dimensions feature located above the canvas to easily access them again. Okay, so now you've learned how to keep your files organized and set the dimensions for your canvas, you're ready to get your first project started off right. Practice what you learned by starting a new project that you can use to follow along while watching the remaining videos for this course. The example camrec files and video clips available for download from the course site can be used to practice creating your first project, or you can use your own video clips if you'd like. Make sure to create a folder on your computer's hard drive that you'll download the example media files or your own media to. And then once you've started your Camtasia project, select a dimension size for the canvas of your project. In the next section, you'll learn how to use Camtasia's fundamental features for your e-learning projects. In this video, you'll learn how to get started by importing media to use in your video or e-learning project. And a good e-learning project usually uses different types of media such as video clips, audio, or images. In this section, you'll see what types of media can be used in Camtasia, and then you'll understand in detail how to import and organize media in your clip bin and library so that it's easy to use in your e-learning project. Something great about Camtasia Studio is that it provides flexibility in what types of media you can use, such as several different types of video, audio, and images. However, it's important to keep in mind that the more media you use in your project, the larger the published file size will be. Chances are that you won't have the need to use all of these file types, but it's important to know what types of files you actually can use in Camtasia so you're aware of its full potential. If you're using Camtasia to create e-learning courses, then you might be wondering if it's possible to import PowerPoint slides. You can't import PowerPoint slides as the traditional PowerPoint file type using the Import Media option, but what you can do is save your PowerPoint slides as images, and then import them as either a JPEG or a PNG image file. And we'll talk more about using PowerPoint slides in your Camtasia e-learning projects in Section 5 when we cover recording presentations. Now that you're aware of the different types of media that can be used, let's talk about how you can import these file types into Camtasia so it's easy for you to access in your project. It's easy to import media to your clip-in by ensuring that the clip-in tab is selected, then either clicking on the Import Media option located above the clip-in, or you can simply right-click in the clip-in and select the Import Media option. After selecting the Import Media option, you'll be prompted to browse your computer for the media you'd like to import. For this example, we'll import the example video clip, an audio file, and an image that you can download from the example files on the course site if you're following along. You can import these files one at a time by clicking on them, then clicking the Open button, or you can select multiple files to import by holding down your Control key on your keyboard and then selecting the files you'd like to import. Once you have the files you would like to import selected, just click the Open button and they'll be imported into your project. If you'd like to remove any of the files that you have imported, then you can right-click and select the Remove option. Okay, now that we've got media imported into the project, you'll notice that they are organized into different sections based on the type of media it is. When working on larger projects that use a lot of different media, having the files organized by whether they are video clips, audio, or images makes it easy to quickly find what you're looking for. And as you add more media to your project, Camtasia will automatically organize it into these categories. Another option you have for importing and organizing the media in your project is the library. The library is great for media that you may want to use in several different projects. By adding it to the library, the media will be permanently available there whenever you use Camtasia, and anything imported into the clip-in is only available in that single project you're working on. So if you have media you'll be using over and over in different projects, then you might be interested in importing that media to the library. And something I love about the library is that you can set up folders to help you stay organized. Before importing anything into the library, I'd recommend creating a folder for it so it's easy to find later. For this example, we'll create a folder for audio files that we can use as background music in various projects. To create the folder, just right-click and select New Folder, and now we just need to enter the name of the folder, which will be background music. Okay, now that the background music folder has been created, we can import media to it by selecting the folder and using the Import Media option just like we did with the clip-in. If you'd like, you can move it to a different folder by selecting it, then dragging and dropping it into the folder you'd like to use. Great, we've got media imported to the clip-in that can be used in just this one project, and we've also added some media to the library that we'll be able to use repeatedly in several projects. In this video, we've gone over how to import media to the clip-in, import media to the library, and how to keep it all organized. Now you're ready to get your project started by importing different types of media. Now that you've learned how to import media, it's time for a little practice. Become more familiar with importing media by importing some clips you'd like to use in your project to your clip-in. If you're following along using the example files, make sure to download them from the course site, then import them into your practice project. If you have any media such as graphics or music that you'd like to use in several projects, then import it to your library and organize it into a folder. In the next video, you'll learn how to add title clips to your project. In this video, you'll learn how to use title clips in your video or e-learning project. We'll start by going over exactly what title clips are, and then I'll show you how to create title clips or use some of the great title clips and backgrounds available from the library. Can you imagine watching a movie or a TV show that didn't display a title towards the beginning? You'd never know what the name or the premise of the show is. That's why you need a good title clip for your e-learning class or video. Title clips are great for doing things like adding titles to the beginning of each section in your project, or just adding a background for parts of your project where you don't have a video clip in the background like quizzes, images, or parts where you only have text. There's a variety of things that you can use title clips for, so let's go over how to create them, and that will give you a better idea of how you might want to use them in your project. Let's go ahead and add the title clip I used in the example project using assets that are available in the library. For this example, we'll use a title clip that is available in the library by clicking on the Library tab, and then selecting the folder titled All Polished. You can also create your own custom title clips using callouts, but using the title clips available in the library can save time and add a polished look to your projects. So we'll start by adding the animated title to track 1 of the timeline. Because we're using an animated title from the library, it already has a text callout that we'll use to add the title. And something you'll notice after adding the animated title is that the background and the text callout are grouped together, which is indicated by this plus symbol. To edit the title, we'll need to click the plus symbol, and now we can see the text callout here in track 2. And the easiest way to edit the text callout is to double click it in the timeline. After double clicking it, the callout tab will open, and we can edit the title right here in the text area. After entering the title for the project, you can format the font using these options here. So let's add a custom look by changing the font and the color. And make sure to use a font that's easy for the viewer to read and a color that contrasts the background. Okay, now I'll change the appearance more by changing the location of the text callout in the canvas by simply selecting it and then dragging and dropping. Okay, there's a nice looking title clip that will do a good job of letting the viewer know what this video is about. In this example, we covered how to create a title clip using an animated title available in the library, but you could also create your own custom title by importing an image into the clip bin to use as the background instead. In summary, you can create nice looking title clips using assets already available in the library, or you can create your own custom title clips using text callouts and an image for the background. No matter which method you choose, title clips can be a very nice addition for a more professional look. Now it's your turn to practice by creating a title clip for your practice project. If you're following along with the example project, I used the animated title available in the folder labeled All Polished from the library. And now that you've learned how to create title clips, you're ready to move on to the next section where you'll learn how to add transitions between clips in your project for a more professional look. In this video, you'll learn how to add a more polished look to your video or e-learning project using transitions. We'll start by showing you some examples of how transitions can be used, then we'll cover how to add them to your project and edit the duration of the transition to suit the needs of your project. If you've been following along with the practice activities and have added some clips to the timeline without transitions, you might have noticed how it can look a little choppy when going from one scene to the next. Transitions are a great feature in Camtasia that make it easy to add a polished look and avoid these choppy transitions when going from one clip to the next in the timeline. And as you can see in this example project, as I progress through the timeline between clips, I have these fade transitions. But you also have more dramatic transition options such as this cube rotate transition. This is a great way to add some pizzazz to your project or simply move from one clip to the next without an abrupt change. To see all of the transitions you have available and add them to your project, you can click on the Transitions tab, and you'll find a library of transitions to choose from. There's quite a few to choose from here, so before adding a transition to your project, you'll want to preview it to see what it will look like. To preview the transition before adding it to your project, you can simply double-click the one you want to preview, and it will be displayed in the canvas. What I'd recommend is to see what transitions you have available, and think about how you might be able to use them in your project by browsing through the library and previewing the transitions. In this example project, I use the fade transition because it doesn't distract from the content of the video. Once you decide which transition you'd like to use, it's easy to add to your project. All you need to do is click on the transition you'd like to add, then drag and drop it between the clips that you're adding the transition for. So let's add a fade transition after the title clip and the next clip by dragging and dropping it in between those two clips. Now that I've got my transition added to the timeline, I can preview it in the canvas to see how it looks. And it's looking great, but there may be times where you want to shorten or increase the length of the duration, and that's easy to do by hovering your mouse over the end of the transition in the timeline until you see this double-headed arrow appear. Then drag the transition so that it appears longer in the timeline. The longer you make the transition in the timeline, the slower it will be in the published project. Or you can make the transition quicker by dragging it the opposite direction to shorten it. In this video, we've gone over how to access transitions, how to preview them in the canvas, and add them to your timeline, and then also edit the duration using the Transitions tab. Now you're ready to add a more polished look to your video or your e-learning project by adding transitions. It's time to learn more about transitions by practicing adding at least 2 different transitions to your test project. And make sure to preview the transition so you can make sure you like it, then edit its duration to suit the needs of your project. In the next section, you'll learn how to record voice narration for presentations or lectures. In this video, you'll learn how to record voice narration for your project. We'll start by discussing the different options you have for recording narration in your project, then we'll go over the details of recording narration for projects like lectures or presentations, and also how to edit your voice narration. There's 2 common scenarios where you'll want to record narration for your project. If you're creating an e-learning course teaching somebody how to use software, then you'll want to record narration for screencasts or screen recordings. If you're creating a lecture or presentation-based e-learning course, then you'll want to record the narration of your presentation or lecture. When recording narration for a screencast, you'll be able to use the audio recording options that are integrated with the screen recording feature in Camtasia. This makes it easy to sync up your narration with the screen recording and makes the overall workflow easier. If you're recording narration for a presentation or a lecture, then you'll want to use the Voice Narration tab, which you may have access to by clicking on the More option. In this section, we'll be covering how to record narration for lectures and presentations, because we'll cover recording narration for screencasts in section 4 when we cover screen recordings in more detail. Before we dive into recording voice narration, I have a few tips. First of all, to make sure you have a good quality recording, you want to make sure you have a quiet place for your recording and a good microphone. When it comes to microphones, there's some big difference in the type of mic you use. You can easily use microphones built into laptops or a basic headset that you can get for cheap, but you may notice that the audio quality is not as good as what you'll get with a higher quality microphone like the Blue Snowball or the Yeti. My last tip that will help to improve your audio recording is to make sure you have your storyboard or script in a convenient spot that makes it easy to read while you're recording. For more tips on using a storyboard, make sure to review section 2.1 of this course. Now these are just a couple of tips to help you get started. There's definitely a lot more information and resources out there that will help improve the quality of your recording, but if you keep these tips in mind, you're well on your way to a clean audio recording. Once you're ready to start recording your presentation or lecture in Camtasia, you'll select the Voice Narration tab, and you'll find all of your recording options here. Before you go ahead and click the Start Recording button, you'll want to make sure you have all of the settings configured correctly. The first option at the top labeled Mute Speakers During Recording is an important one. In most cases, you'll want to select this option, or else you'll hear your voice coming out of your computer speakers as you're recording. If you're using headphones and you want to hear how your voice sounds, then you can go ahead and leave this option unchecked. For this example, I'm going to mute my speakers so that it doesn't distract me. The next settings we'll need to configure will allow you to choose the input level. It's always a good idea to use the audio setup wizard before you do your first recording, because it will help you configure the input level of your microphone. Every microphone and voice is different, so it's important that you use these settings to get it just right before going through all the trouble of completing the recording, only to find out that you didn't have it set at a good input level. Okay, I've got all my settings configured, so now I'm ready to click the Start Recording button to start recording my voice narration. As you can see, I can monitor the input level of my recording as I'm going here in the input level section, and then once I'm done recording, I'll just go ahead and click the Stop Recording button. After clicking the Stop Recording button, I'll be prompted to select a folder I want to save it to, and as I've recommended, I'll use the same folder that I'm using for all media in my project. And then after I save the recording, it will automatically be added to the timeline. Now that my recording is in the timeline, I'll be able to edit it by trimming and cutting, but we'll talk more about that in section 7. For now, let's talk about the useful options for editing audio available from the Audio tab. Starting at the top, we have the option for leveling the volume, and what this does is even out the audio in spots where you may have been more quiet or louder so that it's a consistent volume throughout. The next option does exactly what it says. It removes background noise from your recording. If you didn't follow through on the tips I mentioned at the beginning, then you may have some noise and you can use this option to get rid of it. And then down towards the bottom we have the audio editing tools that will allow us to increase or decrease the volume. And this is useful if you did not set the input level on your microphone to a good level. There's also options to fade the audio in and out, but you'll usually only want to use that on music. As you get more advanced with audio editing, there are also options to edit selections of your narration using the audio points that you see here. A good example of how you might use audio points is if you want to lower the volume in one section of audio, but not the entire clip. If I want to lower the volume in just this section, I can add an audio point here, and then another audio point here. And then I can just use my mouse to drag the green line down between these audio points, and it will lower the volume in only the section between the two audio points I added. Okay, that's an overview of your voice narration options. In this video, we've gone over some tips for recording narration, how to record voice narration then edit it so that it sounds great, and now it's time to warm up your vocal cords to practice what you've learned. Practice voice narration by recording a short clip of narration, then test using the editing options until it sounds the way you want it. Now that you've learned how to record voice narration, you've got the fundamentals down, and you're ready to move on to the next section where you'll learn how to record screencasts. Have you ever watched a screencast or instructional video where the narrator or something going on in the background drove you nuts? And I'm sure that whatever this distraction was made it very difficult to understand what the narrator was teaching you. In this video, you'll learn how to prepare yourself for a quality screen recording. When creating instructional materials, it's crucial that there are no annoying distractions because something as minor as a buzzing noise can prevent the learner from achieving the objectives. In this video, I have a few tips that will help to prevent annoying distractions. My first tip is to prepare your computer desktop, especially if you'll be recording it in your video. A desktop like this with a mess of folders and a distracting background can make it easy for your viewer to miss what you're clicking on or what you're trying to teach them in your screencast. If you're going to be recording your desktop, make the effort to clean up your folders and icons and replace any distracting backgrounds with something neutral like this. An easy way to hide all of the icons on your desktop when using Windows is to right-click in the desktop, then select View, then Show Desktop Icons. My next tip is to make sure you use a storyboard and to have the storyboard displayed on a separate screen if possible, as described in Section 2 of this course. A storyboard is especially important when it comes to creating e-learning courses using Camtasia because it helps you plan for interactions such as quizzes or hotspot activities. And it saves you from a lot of editing or re-recording later. Once your computer desktop is cleaned off and you have your storyboard ready, the next thing you'll want to do is practice. A few practice runs of what you scripted out in your storyboard can greatly improve the end result, and it'll save you a lot of time of trimming and cutting later. Yes, Camtasia has some great editing features, but they can only do so much. For a quality recording, you need to practice so that it comes off sounding natural and not like you're reading it from a script. You should be the only person that knows there's a script, and the best way to accomplish that is by practicing. One last thing to make sure of before you start recording is that you're in a quiet, interruption-free environment. It's obvious that a loud environment like a coffee shop or a shared workspace will affect the quality of your recording, but you also want to make sure that you pay attention to the smaller things, like the whir of an air conditioning vent, or the hum of computer accessories like the system fan on your computer. Do everything you can to make sure the environment you're recording in is noise and distraction free, and you may not even need to use Camtasia's background noise removal feature. If you do a good job of prepping your desktop, using a storyboard, practicing, and recording in a quiet environment, then you're well on your way to a quality recording. We'll cover some features in Camtasia that will help you improve the quality of your recording, but those features can only do so much, so it's important that you follow through on these tips and not depend on Camtasia to fix poor quality recordings. Now it's time to practice what you've learned by preparing a recording environment by following the tips I've described in this video. And now that you've learned some tips for recording, you're ready to move on to the next video where you'll learn how to create a screencast that can be used in an e-learning course. In the last video of Section 4, you learned everything you need to know to be prepared to create a quality screencast. Now that you're prepared, it's time to use Camtasia's features to record what's on your screen. In this video, you'll learn how to create screencasts by recording your screen. The screen recording options are easily accessible in the upper left, just above the clip in, by clicking on the option labeled Record the Screen, which is next to the red record symbol. After clicking on Record the Screen, Camtasia will minimize, and the Record Screen taskbar will open along with this dotted green box, which represents the size of the area that you're recording. You can resize the recording area by dragging these controls, but the easier way to adjust it is to use the options in the Select Area section of the taskbar. If you want to record the entire screen, you can select the full screen option. Or if you want to record a custom size, you can click on this arrow to open a menu of preset sizes, or you can even type in the dimensions you'd like here. However, it's important to be careful with these options if you're not sure what you're doing. Changing the dimensions to a size that is a different aspect ratio than the rest of the project can cause your video to look blurry. And if you're a beginner, I'd recommend selecting the same size you chose when selecting the dimensions for your project, and that'll keep things consistent. And if you're entering custom dimensions, make sure to keep this chain link connected so that the aspect ratio remains consistent. 854 by 480 is a common size that'll work well, so we'll go ahead and leave that as the size. Now that I've got my recording stage size set, I can configure my audio and video input options in the section of the taskbar labeled Recorded Inputs. If you'd also like to record video of yourself through the webcam on your computer, then you can click on the option which says Webcam Off by default. After clicking on the webcam button, you'll see a video preview that you can use to make any adjustments to your webcam or how you're sitting. Whatever you see in the preview is what will also appear as a picture-in-picture in your screen recording. If you only want to record your screen and voice, then you can leave the webcam option set to off. The next setting we need to check on is the audio input. Next to the audio on button, you'll see this audio input slider that you can use to adjust the volume of your microphone. If you speak into your microphone and this bar turns red, then your audio input may need to be turned down a little. You also have more audio recording options available by clicking on the down arrow located next to the audio on button. After clicking on the arrow, you can select which microphone you'd like to use if you have more than one installed, and you also have this option to record system audio, which is great if you need to record any of the sounds made by your computer, along with your voice. And then down at the bottom of this menu, you can access your full range of audio input options by clicking on Options in the menu. In most cases, you'll get by just fine using the audio input slider, but if you need even more options, then you can select Options from this menu. Now that we've got all of the recording settings configured, I'm ready to go ahead and start recording. When I'm ready to start recording, I just need to click the red record button, then you'll see this countdown displayed. When the countdown completes, you'll be recording everything on your screen, so make sure you're ready. And once you start recording, you can stop at any time by pressing F10 or clicking the stop button on your control bar. After clicking stop, you'll be able to preview what you just recorded, and if you like it, then you can click the save and edit or the produce buttons. If you don't like it, then you can click the delete button to dump it and start over. In most cases, you'll want to use the save and edit button so that you can do a little editing, but if you're happy with what you created without editing, then you can go ahead and click the produce button to publish your finished video. After clicking the save and edit button, you'll be prompted to save your Camtasia file, which is the recording file, like we discussed in section 2. Make sure to save it in the folder you created for your project so it's easy to access later, and you don't have issues caused by the Camrec and Camproj files becoming unlinked. After saving the Camrec file, Camtasia will open and your recording will automatically be added to the timeline of your project, and now it's ready for editing. From here you can add callouts, animations, and cut out any unwanted parts of your video. We'll cover those topics in more detail in the next couple of videos in this section. And something you'll notice is that when it's added to the timeline, the audio and video are combined, which makes for easy editing, but there may be times where you want to separate the audio and video for situations where you want to edit only the audio or only the video. If you'd like to separate the audio and video into different tracks, then you can right-click and select the option to separate audio and video. In this section, you learned how to configure screen recording options, as well as how to create screencasts using Camtasia. Now it's time to practice what you've learned by creating a quick screencast. After creating your recording, make sure to use the Save and Edit option so you can practice editing your screencast. As you've learned how to create screencasts, I'm going to show you how to trim and cut any unwanted parts using Camtasia's editing features in the next section. In the last video of this section, you learned how to record a screencast and add it to your project. Now that you've recorded a screencast and added it to your timeline, it's time to improve the quality by trimming and cutting. Even if you do follow through on the tips I've given for improving the quality of your recording, there will likely be times where you want to cut out a piece of your recording. In order to make a cut, you'll first need to make a selection of the part you want to cut on the timeline. In the example project, I have this section with a pause that I'd like to cut out. To make the selection, I'll use the green and red in and out points that you see on each side of the playhead. You just drag the playhead to the part on the timeline where you want to start your cut, then you'll grab the red out point and drag it to the end of the part you want to cut. The green control represents the beginning of the selection, and the red control represents the end of the selection. The highlighted part of the timeline that you see after making the selection is what you've selected to cut or edit from the clip. A great feature that helps you to be more precise is the zoom in and out slider located above the timeline. If I need to be real precise, I can zoom in on the timeline and select exactly what I need. Before you make your cut, it's a good idea to preview what you've selected so you can be sure you don't make a mistake and cut something you need. You can preview what you've selected by pressing the spacebar or clicking the play button. After previewing it, you can adjust your selection by moving the in or out points. Another feature that comes in handy if you're working on a project with multiple tracks is this option to lock a track. If you need to make a cut, but you don't want to make the cut in all of your tracks, then you can lock the tracks that you don't want to cut. After locking the track, you can make your cut and it will only apply the cut to the tracks that are unlocked. Once you're happy with your selection, you can click the scissors icon or press the delete key on your keyboard to make the cut. And one important thing to make note of is that using the cut tool cuts it then stitches the remaining parts together, which makes adding effects easier. If you click the delete key, it will remove that section and leave a gap. Personally, I prefer to use the cut option so that it closes the gap, unless you're making the cut so that you can add a new clip or callout into the gap. There may also be occasions where you don't want to cut out a selection, but you want to split a clip so that you can add in a new clip or a callout. For example, if I want to add in a title clip in this spot on the timeline, I can move my playhead to that spot, then click the split icon and it will split the clip. Now that it's split, I can move these other clips over to make room for my title clip. Another situation where you might need to do some trimming is at the beginning and the end of your recording. If you just want to trim a little off of the beginning or the end of your clip, then you can crop it by hovering your mouse pointer over the end until you get this double-headed arrow, then click and drag in the clip to crop it. Okay, that sums up your options for trimming and cutting media in Camtasia. You always want to do everything you can to produce a high-quality recording, but we're not perfect, so chances are you'll need to do some fine-tuning. If so, you can use the cut, split, and cropping features to remove unwanted parts of your recording. You can practice what you've learned in this video by doing a little trimming and cutting on the example screencast available for download from the course site, or your own screencast that you created for the practice activity in the last section. Try all of the options we covered, including cutting, deleting, splitting, and cropping. And now that you've learned how to cut and trim media in Camtasia, in the next video I'm going to show you how to take your screencast to the next level by adding effects like callouts. Now that your screencast is fine-tuned with trims and cuts, you're ready to get your learner's attention to important points in your video using a great feature in Camtasia known as callouts. There's several different types of callouts to choose from, which can help you draw attention to something in your video, spotlight a certain part of the screen, add text, or even blur out something that you don't want your viewers to see. In this example project, you can see I've added spotlight callouts to bring attention to features used in PowerPoint to insert videos. I also used a different kind of callout known as a text callout to emphasize important points being covered in the example project. So let me show you how to add callouts to your project. Before adding the callout, you'll want to place the playhead in the spot that you want the callout to be added to your timeline, and then you'll access the callouts tab. And once I'm in the callouts tab, the next thing you'll need to do is select what type of callout you'd like to add. You can see all of the options for callouts by clicking on this arrow to open the drop-down menu. And when you see the callout that you want to use, just click on it, and it will be added to the timeline, and you'll be able to preview it in the canvas. If you want to add this same callout to a different spot in the timeline, then you can just move the playhead to that spot, and then click the Add Callout button. If you use the Add Callout button, the previous callout you used will be automatically added. If you add a callout and decide that you actually wanted to use a different one, then you can click on the callout in the canvas or on the timeline, and then open the callout drop-down menu and select the new one you want to use, and it will change to the new one you've selected. Once you've added a callout, you might want to edit it by changing its size, duration, or position in the canvas. To change the size or the position of the callout, all you need to do is click on it in the canvas, then use these controls to change the size, or drag and drop it to move it to a different spot. If you want to change how long it's on the screen for, then you'll need to select it in the timeline, hover your mouse over the end of it until the double-headed arrow appears, and then drag it out to the point you want it to end at. You'll also notice that you have several options in the callout tab that will allow you to do things like adjust how it fades in or out, or if you're creating an interactive e-learning course, this is where you would change the callout into a flash hotspot, but we'll cover the details of using hotspots in section 6 when we discuss adding interactivity. It's also possible to add movement or animate a callout by using the Visual Properties tab. You may need to click on the More option to access this Visual Properties tab. For example, if I want this callout to start here in the lower left corner, then move to the upper right, I'll need to start by selecting my callout, then I'll need to position the playhead somewhere in the middle of the callout so that I'm able to see it on the canvas. Before you can add your animation, you need to move the callout into where you want it to start from. So if I want it to start in the lower left corner, then I'll drag it down here. And it may be your natural instinct to place the callout where you want it to end, but when creating an animation, you'll need to remember to move it to its starting point. Okay, now with my callout selected, I'll go to the Visual Properties tab and then click the Add Animation button. After clicking Add Animation, you'll see this blue dot appear on your callout in the timeline, indicating the animation. And something important to understand about this blue dot is that it represents when the animation is going to occur on the timeline. If you want the animation to happen at a different time, you can drag it to a new location within the callout on the timeline. At this point we've added our animation, but if you preview it in the canvas you'll see that nothing's happening. That's because we haven't set the endpoint for the animation. And to do that I'll double click the animation dot at the end of the green arrow, and then I can drag my callout into the position where I want the animation to end in the upper right corner. Alright, now let's see if that worked by previewing it. Awesome, it worked! I'm sure you can think of a lot of different ways to animate callouts or media clips in your timeline, but remember to not overdo it or the animation may distract from the content you're teaching. Okay, that sums up the process for adding, editing, and animating callouts in Camtasia. I'm sure you'll find that callouts can be especially useful for e-learning courses and screencasts where you need to grab the learner's attention. You can practice what you've learned by adding some callouts to your project. Also try animating a callout to really grab the learner's attention. And now that you've learned how to use callouts in Camtasia, you're ready for the next section of this video course where you'll learn how to capture lectures or presentations using Camtasia. Everybody knows that Camtasia is great for capturing screen recordings, but did you know that it's also great for recording a presentation or lecture that your students can watch from a distance or use as a refresher later on? Camtasia Studio 8 has some great options that make it easy to record a presentation or a lecture to use as part of an e-learning course. In this video I'll show you how to create a recording of yourself that you can later combine with PowerPoint slides or screen recordings. Let's get started by accessing the recording options. It may be your natural instinct to try and access the recording options by going to the Record the Screen option, but if we want to record from our camera, we need to access the Record Camera tab, which you may need to click More to access. After clicking Record Camera, you'll find your camera recording options along with a preview of what your camera is capturing. Depending on how you look in the preview, you may need to adjust the position of your camera or configure the settings using the options we have here. Above the preview window is the Available Video Devices drop-down menu. If you have more than one camera installed on your computer, then you may have options for which camera to use. I only have one camera on my computer, so I only have the one option. The Properties button will allow you to adjust the settings for your camera to improve how things look. And depending on what type of camera you have, the settings available in the properties will vary. The Format button will allow you to adjust the properties such as the output size and frame rate. If you're unsure of what you're doing, I'd recommend leaving these settings as the default. And one option you may want to change is the output size, but something you have to make sure of is that you select an output size that is the same aspect ratio as what you've selected for your published project. If you do adjust some of the settings available in the Format button and find that it makes your video blurry or distorted, then you can click this Default button to restore the settings back to default. So if you get yourself into some trouble changing a bunch of settings, then you can click this Default button and it will return everything back to normal. You also have some options here for adjusting your audio recording. You'll always want to make sure that the Record Audio option is selected, unless you don't want to record your audio for some reason. I always like to mute the speakers because I find it distracting to hear myself through the speakers as I'm doing the recording, and it will create an echo unless you're using headphones. And just like when we were configuring the settings for a screen recording, you can use the audio input slider to adjust the input volume, or you can click the setup button to access the audio setup wizard to adjust more audio settings. After configuring your settings so that it looks and sounds good, you can click the Start Recording button to begin recording. When you're done recording, just click the Stop Recording button and you'll be asked to save the recording just like we were with the screen recording. And remember that it's a good idea to save all of your media files in the same folder so it's easy to find. And once it's been saved, it will automatically be added to the timeline into the position where you had your playhead. When your recording is in your timeline, you can trim and cut, add special effects, or add other media. And something you'll notice is that the camera recording is smaller, so it's a good idea to use that as a picture-in-picture with a screen recording or PowerPoint slides. And this is a great way to display information as you're describing it in your camera recording. Okay, and that sums up how you can use Camtasia to record yourself from the webcam on your computer, giving a presentation or a lecture that can be combined with media such as PowerPoint slides or screen recordings. Now it's time to practice what you've learned by recording your practice presentation. Make sure to adjust the video and audio settings so that you look and sound good in the video. In the next section, we'll go over how you can combine your recording with PowerPoint slides or other media to complete your presentation. Have you ever wished you could have an online version of your presentation or lecture available? or felt the need to flip your classroom by having your students watch your presentation online from home so they're ready for interactive activities in the classroom? In this video, I'm going to show you how to use PowerPoint in combination with Camtasia to turn your live presentations into e-learning courses. There's a couple of different ways to use PowerPoint with Camtasia. You can use the PowerPoint add-in to record your audio and add your slides to Camtasia at the same time, or you can record the narration separately and then import your PowerPoint slides as image files. There's pros and cons to each, so we'll go over the details so that you can decide which option will work best for you. Let's start by going over how to use the PowerPoint add-in. The PowerPoint add-in is great because it gives you the ability to deliver your presentation as you normally would and record your audio and video while also importing slides to Camtasia. This option is great if you're recording a live lecture or you have a polished presentation. The downside to using the PowerPoint add-in is that you'll want to make sure you practice your presentation so you can deliver it smoothly from start to finish. It's not as easy to record your presentations in several takes when using the PowerPoint add-in, so if you're not recording a live presentation, or you want to break up your recording into several takes, then you might be better off importing your PowerPoint slides as images, but I'd recommend testing both options. There are a few different ways you can access the PowerPoint add-in. It can be accessed from the Camtasia welcome screen when you first start it up by clicking the down arrow on the Record the Screen option, then selecting the Record PowerPoint option, or from directly within PowerPoint if you've enabled the add-in. To enable the PowerPoint add-in, go to Tools, then Options, and select the PowerPoint tab. From within the PowerPoint tab, select the Enable PowerPoint option and click OK. After enabling the PowerPoint add-in, you'll be able to access the Camtasia features to record your presentation directly from within PowerPoint. So now that we have the add-in enabled and ready to use, I'll click on the Add-ins tab, and I have my options for the Camtasia add-in right here. Something great about the add-in is that you also have the option to record video of yourself using your webcam. And by default, I have the Record Audio icon selected. If I want to also record video, I can click on this icon, and if I want to see a preview of the video to make sure my camera is lined up right, I can click on the Video Preview icon here. You can also double check or adjust your Camtasia recording settings by clicking on this icon here. Once you're ready to start recording, click the Record icon, and your presentation will go into presentation mode, and you can begin delivering your presentation as if you had an audience in front of you. When you're done recording, you can press the Stop Recording button or hit the Escape key on your keyboard if you're in slideshow view. After stopping your recording, you'll be prompted to save your camera file, just like when creating a screen recording, and after saving it, you'll be asked whether you'd like to edit or produce your recording. Unless you give a flawless presentation, you're probably going to need to select the option to edit, and when you select edit, the recording will be automatically imported into Camtasia and ready to edit just like with screen recordings. For more information on editing, view the videos in section 4 of this course. If you'd rather break your recording up into several takes, or you want to add slides in between other video clips, then you may want to record your audio and video separately like we reviewed in section 4, then import your slides as images. The downside to this option is that it does not capture any animations used in the PowerPoint. So if you are using animations as part of your presentation, then you'll be better off using the PowerPoint add-in. If you want to import a slide as an image, you just go to the PowerPoint after you've finished creating the slides, then click File and Save As. From the Save As dialog window, open the Save As Type drop-down menu, then either select JPEG or PNG file type, and then you'll be able to save the slides as images to your project folder. I prefer to use the PNG file type for better quality text rendering. After clicking Save, you'll be asked if you want to just save the current slide or all slides in the presentation. If you need all of the slides as images, you can go ahead and select the option for all slides, and it will save all of your slides as images in a folder. Now that the slides are saved as images, we can go into Camtasia and import them to our clip-in by selecting the Import Media option and selecting the images to be imported. Once all the slides are imported, you can simply drag and drop them into your timeline to correspond with the audio or video you may already have in your timeline. And as you can see, this option gives you a little more flexibility to fix mistakes, add callouts, and choose where you want your slides, but you can't use animations, and it may take a little more work. Okay, that summarizes your options for using PowerPoint in combination with Camtasia to create online presentations that can be used as additional resources or to flip your classroom. Now it's time to practice what you've learned by recording your practice presentation using PowerPoint. Make sure to enable the PowerPoint add-in and test using it. Also try importing your slides as image files so you can see how that works. In the next section, we'll go over how you can add some Hollywood special effects to your Camtasia project using the green screen effect. In this video, you'll learn how to add some Hollywood special effects to your video by removing a green screen background. We'll start by covering what the green screen effect is, then I'll give you some tips and show you how to use the green screen effect. So let's go ahead and get started. If you're using Camtasia to record a presentation or create software training, the green screen effect can be used to take your project to the next level. For training videos or presentations, it's helpful to remove any distractions or place the host in a different setting by removing the background. For software training, you can place the host right there in the software to guide the learner by using the green screen effect to remove the background. With a little creativity, I'm sure you can come up with a lot of ideas for how the green screen effect can be used in your e-learning projects. When it comes to using the green screen effect, there's a few things to keep in mind that will affect the quality. First off, you need a green screen. With a quick search online, you'll come to find that there's a lot of options out there, and many of which are inexpensive. You can buy large sheet-sized green screens, or I really like the kind that fold up because they're easy to stand up behind your desk. It also really helps to have some kind of lighting. If you have any shadows on the green screen, it can be really difficult to remove the background, so it's good to use the lighting to remove all shadows if possible. And my last tip is to be careful of what you're wearing. Avoid wearing any green or reflective jewelry. Obviously, green clothing can make you look like a part of the background, and reflective jewelry or glasses can create a glare. If you're wearing glasses, try turning them slightly down. Okay, now that you're aware of what to pay attention to when using a green screen, I'll show you how to remove the green screen background on this clip I already filmed. The first thing I'll do is crop the background. I'll be removing the background completely, so it helps to start by removing as much of it as possible. Okay, now I'll need to go to the Visual Properties tab by selecting More than Visual Properties, and then I'll select the Remove Color option, because we're going to be removing the green color. After selecting the Remove Color option, I need to select which color to remove by opening the Color drop-down menu and selecting the option to pick a color. This will turn my mouse into an eyedropper that I'll use to select a part of the green background. And if you look closely, you'll notice different shades of green, especially if there's shadows. Try and pick the dominant shade of green and it will remove the background more cleanly. Sometimes this process takes some troubleshooting by reselecting different parts of the green background until you can get it just right. After selecting the shade of green, it will remove most of the background, but most likely it won't be perfect and you'll still see traces of green in the background. You can do some fine-tuning using the sliders in the Visual Properties tab. We'll start by using the Tolerance slider, which lets you determine how sensitive the effect is. If I slide it to the right, it will remove more green, but you don't want to get carried away and slide it too much or it will begin to remove more than you'd like. Okay, now that I've got that looking good, I can use the Softness slider to smooth out any rough edges. Just like with the Tolerance slider, you don't want to get carried away, or it could make your image look blurry. Okay, now it's looking pretty good, but sometimes you can't get it looking quite right no matter how much fine-tuning you do with these sliders. You still might see a faint halo around the person. In that case, you can use the Defringe slider to reduce this halo effect from any leftover color. We'll talk about hue in a minute, but a couple of other options you have here are Invert Effect, which will hide everything except the green screen background, and we also have the Reset option, which is helpful if you're having a hard time getting it to look right and want to start over. Okay, now that we have the green completely removed, we'll need to add the new background. For this example, I'm going to use the Subtle Gradient background, so I'll add it to the timeline in the track beneath the green screen clip. It's important to make sure the background is on the bottom layer so that you're able to see the green screen clip and any other media you'll be using in your project. Now we can preview it to see how it looks with the background added behind it. At this point, you may want to do some more fine-tuning by readjusting the sliders. In particular, the Hue slider is helpful to adjust the coloring so that it matches the background more closely. Alright, now I've got the green screen background cleanly removed. This is a great feature in Camtasia Studio that I'm sure you can think of a lot of uses for. Remember that when it comes to using a green screen, the quality of the recording is important. If you have a lot of shadows or interfering colors in your recording, then it will be difficult if not impossible to cleanly remove the background. Now it's time to practice what you've learned by recording a clip using a green screen, then use the Visual Properties tab in Camtasia to remove the background. Be prepared to do some fine-tuning using the Tolerance and Softness sliders to get it just right. In the next section, I'll show you how to make your e-learning courses more interactive using Camtasia Studio. If you're using Camtasia to create e-learning courses, then chances are that you'll want to add quizzes or surveys to your project. In this video, we'll go over how to create, edit, and produce quizzes that can help learners retain the information and allow you to assess their performance and provide credit for completion. Before adding a quiz, there's a few important points to know about. First, the dimensions of your project must be at least 640 by 480, so you'll want to make sure your project is large enough before you start working, or you may end up having to adjust objects on your timeline later. Second, your project must be published using the MP4 option, as quizzes are not supported in other publishing formats such as WMV. And the third tip is that you should do all of your editing first. If you add a quiz before you finish editing all of your media and doing your trimming and cutting, then you may need to adjust your quizzes on the timeline later. Okay, so let's go ahead and add a quiz. The process for adding quizzes is a little different from adding media in that it's not an object that you add to the timeline. Quizzes are attached either to a point in the timeline so that they appear at a certain time, or you can attach it to a piece of media in the timeline so that they appear when that piece of media appears on the timeline. To add a quiz, we'll start by selecting Quiz View, which will open a different view for your timeline that is used to determine where you're going to place your quiz. After selecting Quiz View, you'll see this new area displayed above the timeline. You'll also notice these bars displayed above the timeline and above each media object in the timeline, and this is where you'll add quizzes. When you hover your mouse over the bar above the timeline, you'll see this red marker appear. Click anywhere in the space to create a timeline quiz. And once the quiz is created, you can drag it to anywhere in the timeline, so you don't need to worry if you need to move it later. If you hover your mouse over the bar located above any media objects you have in your project, you'll see this pink marker appear. And this is where you'll click to attach a quiz to a media object. Something nice about a quiz attached to a media object is that it is attached to this piece of media, so it will move with this object anytime you move it on the timeline. The process of editing a timeline quiz, or a quiz attached to a media object, is the same, and they both appear the same in the finished product for your viewers. For this example, we'll add a timeline quiz. So I'll click on the bar located above the timeline, and the quizzing tab will open automatically. The quizzing tab is where we'll be doing most of the work. We'll start by adding a name at the top of the quiz here. How about we call it the Camtasia quiz? Now before we start adding questions, let's take a look at these settings here. If you want to grade your learner's performance on the quiz, or provide a score, then you need to make sure the Score quiz setting is selected. And if you want your students to be able to see what their score is after they complete the quiz, then you'll want to make sure the viewers can see answers after submitting option is selected. I'll go ahead and leave those options selected as I do want to provide a score, and now I'll move on to adding the questions for my quiz. By default, Camtasia automatically gets you started with one quiz question that you can simply modify by clicking on it. The first thing we'll need to do is select what type of question we would like by opening the Question Type drop-down menu, and we have options of multiple choice, fill in the blank, short answer, and true and false. For this example, I'll select multiple choice. Next, I'll enter the text for my question here. Now I'll need to scroll down in the Quizzing tab and enter my answer options. The options you have for entering the answers will be different depending on what type of question it is. This is a multiple choice question, so I'll start by entering my first answer here. Now we can enter the next answer by clicking here, then typing. And now we'll enter one more answer option here. And you can indicate which of these is the correct answer by clicking in the checkbox located to the left of the correct answer. Once you're done with your first question, you can add more questions by clicking the Add Question button and repeating the process. After adding your questions, you can always go back and make edits by accessing the Quizzing tab and selecting the question you'd like to edit here. To preview the quiz, you can click the Preview button located here, and it will open in your browser so you can test it out. Once you're done with the quiz, the next step would be to select the production options that will allow you to choose how you would like to see results. With Camtasia, you can have the quiz results emailed to you, or if you're using a learning management system, there's options for using SCORM so that the results can be tracked in your LMS. We'll cover all of your options for having quiz results emailed or tracking scores in an LMS in Section 7. Okay, and that sums up the process for creating and editing quizzes that can help make your e-learning projects more interactive and allow you to assess your learners' performance. Now it's up to you to come up with creative ways of using quizzes in your projects to improve retention. You can now practice what you've learned by creating a quiz. Get a feel for all of your options by adding a question using each question type, then preview it so you can see what the finished product will look like. In the next video, we'll go over another method for adding interactivity to your projects using what are called hotspots to create interactive activities. One of Camtasia's greatest features for creating e-learning courses is what's called a hotspot. By using hotspots, you can create realistic assessments that require the learner to perform the process you're teaching them in the e-learning course. In this video, we'll go over how to use hotspots in your Camtasia e-learning projects to create realistic software scenarios. If you've done much research on learning theories and instructional design, you know that basic multiple-choice quiz questions are not always the most effective way of providing assessments. Realistic scenarios that require the learner to perform the procedure being taught is a better indicator of whether they truly retained the information. And this is especially true when it comes to software training. Why ask a multiple-choice question when you can use hotspots to require them to actually perform the process? Camtasia makes it easy to create these realistic software scenarios using transparent hotspot callouts. For example, if you're teaching a process that requires the learner to click on a certain button, you can place a transparent hotspot callout over that button in your screencast so that your project pauses and requires the learner to click on the button before continuing. So let's go ahead and add a basic hotspot callout to this project so you can see how it works. To create a transparent hotspot, place the playhead where you want to add the hotspot on the timeline, then access the Callouts tab and select the Transparent Hotspot Callout. After adding the Transparent Hotspot Callout, you'll be able to see where it's located by its controls. Now we'll need to resize it and place it over the button or option that we want the learner to click on. Okay, now that we've got it placed in the correct spot, the next step will be to select what we want to happen after the learner clicks on the hotspot using the hotspot properties available by clicking on the button labeled Hotspot Properties. By default, the hotspot is set so that the timeline pauses when the playhead reaches it on the timeline. You'll want to make sure this is selected so that the video pauses and allows the learner to click on the hotspot to continue. Moving down, our next set of properties allows us to determine what happens after they click on the hotspot. The most common option used is click to continue, so that the video continues after the learner clicks on it. However, you also have options that will allow you to set the hotspot so that the learner is brought to a certain point in the timeline, or a marker. This is useful if you want to create multiple hotspots that will take the learner to different points in the timeline when clicked. These properties give you the flexibility to create menus, or make your scenarios more realistic. For this example, I'll keep things basic and set it so that the video will continue after the learner clicks on the hotspot. Great, now that I have my transparent hotspot set up, the video will pause when it reaches this point in the timeline, and it won't continue until the learner clicks on the hotspot. You'll want to make sure your narration includes instructions, or you've included text instructions on the screen so that the learner is aware that they need to click on something in order to continue in the project. Transparent hotspot callouts are the more common method, especially for software training, but if you have come up with a creative idea where you want to make a different type of callout into a hotspot, that too can be easily done. For example, I can add a basic rectangle callout, then convert it to a hotspot by clicking this option labeled Make Hotspot. If I were using this as a menu option or some kind of a button, I can label it by adding text here. Then I can adjust the hotspot properties just like I did with the transparent hotspot to determine what happens after it's clicked on. Okay, that sums up what hotspots are and how you can use them to take your e-learning activities to the next level. Creating scenario-based assessments may take a little more thought and planning, but I'm sure you'll find they're well worth it for improved results. To practice creating hotspots, start out by creating a transparent hotspot that you would typically use for software training, then try converting a different type of callout into a hotspot. As you're practicing creating hotspots, try and think of some creative ways that you might be able to use them in your e-learning projects. In the next video, we'll go over how you can make your e-learning projects easier to navigate by creating a menu using Camtasia's Table of Contents option. If you're creating an e-learning course that is long or has several sections, then you might want to create a menu or a table of contents to make the content in each section more accessible. A table of contents can be especially useful if you're creating a project that is going to be used for performance support or as a job aid. In this video, I'll walk you through the process of creating a table of contents that will make your e-learning projects more user-friendly. The first thing we need to do when creating the table of contents is to create the sections that we want listed in the table of contents by adding markers on the timeline where each section of your project begins. The markers will serve as jumping points in the project so that when the user clicks on an option in the table of contents, it will take them to the point in the timeline where we have our markers. In this example project, I have a title clip at the beginning of each section where I'll add markers so that my users will be taken to that part on the timeline when they click on the associated table of contents option. To add the markers, I'll place the playhead at the beginning of each section in the timeline, Then I can either hit the M key on my keyboard, or I can go to Edit, then Markers, and add a marker. After adding the marker, you'll be prompted to give it a name, and make sure to use something descriptive, because whatever name you give it here is how it will be labeled in the table of contents after producing your project. So I'll go ahead and do that in each section. Okay, now that I've got a marker in each section, and I gave them all descriptive names, I'm ready to produce my table of contents, and that's done at the same time that we produce the whole video. So you'll want to make sure your project is ready to publish before doing this. Once you're ready to produce the project, we just need to click on the Produce and Share option, and since we're going to be customizing our project with a table of contents, we'll want to select the Custom Production Settings option, then click Next. Now we need to select the format we're going to use, and it's important to know that in order for the table of contents to work, you have to publish as Flash. So we'll go ahead and leave the recommended Flash option, then click Next. Okay, now we need to make sure that a table of contents is included in our player. So we'll click on the Options tab, and make sure that the Table of Contents option is selected, and then once it's selected we can click Next. We won't need to change any settings on this video options page, so we can click Next again, and we'll be brought to the Markers options page where we can customize the table of contents. From here we have several options. Starting at the top, you can choose to have your markers numbered if you'd like the sections of the table of contents to be numbered. And the next option allows you to configure whether you would like the table of contents to be initially visible at the beginning of the project or not. If you leave this option unchecked, the user will have to click on an option down at the bottom of the player to use the table of contents. Then beneath that, you can choose which markers you would like included in the table of contents, and you can also rename them using this option beneath the list of markers. Then down at the bottom, you can choose if you'd like the table of contents to be on the left or right of the player. And there's also an option that will allow you to choose if you'd like a thumbnail image displayed next to each table of contents option. And then once we're done selecting all the table of contents options, we can click Next, then finish the publish process as normal. There's a lot more to cover when it comes to publishing your project, so make sure to watch the videos in the next section to learn more about producing your project. After publishing the project, you'll have a nice template with a table of contents that makes your project much more user-friendly and easy to navigate. Alright, now that you know how to create a table of contents, it's up to your creativity to think about how they might make your project more useful for your learners. Now it's time to practice what you've learned by creating a project with a table of contents. Make sure to test out some of the different templates and Flash options so you can see what's available to you. In the next section, we'll cover your options for producing and publishing your project much more in depth. Once your project is complete and ready to be shared with your students, you'll find that you have a lot of options for how you decide to publish the project and make it available. In this video, we'll go over all of the publishing options so that you can decide which options are going to work best for your project. When you've gotten to the point where you're ready to publish your project, which can be done as many times as you'd like, go to the Produce and Share option that you see above the clip bin. After clicking Produce and Share, you'll be brought to the Production Wizard window where you can start choosing your production settings. If you open the drop-down menu at the top of the Production Wizard window, you'll see that you have several preset options that make it easy for you to publish your project, and you also have the Custom Production Settings option that you can use to choose exactly which settings you'd like. If you have custom production settings that you want to use in several projects, you can create your own preset with the Add Edit Preset option. Let's start by going over each of these preset options that can make things easy for you. Starting at the top, you have options to share to screencast.com or YouTube. And these options make it quick and easy for you to produce and then share your project on either screencast.com or YouTube if you have an account set up. We'll cover these options in more detail in upcoming videos in this section. The next set of options will produce your project as an MP4, which is one of the most common video file formats that works on most operating systems and browsers. A big difference between these options and the screencast.com or the YouTube options is that it will not automatically post the videos online for you. Your project will be published and saved as files on your computer that you can later upload to a website or a learning management system. There are 4 different MP4 presets that allow you to choose whether you would like to be published in HD and whether you would like it to include a player control bar or not. If your students will be accessing your video from a high-speed internet connection, then you can choose the HD, but if they have slower internet speeds, then you may want to choose the 480p option and it will open faster and require less buffering. In most cases, you're going to want to use the player, unless you're uploading your video to sites like YouTube or Vimeo that already have a built-in player for you. For this example, we'll select the Custom Production Settings option so you can see all of the options available to you. So I'll select Custom Production Settings, and then I'll click the Next button, and I'll be brought to this screen where we'll start by selecting the file format for the video. If you're going to be sharing your video online, then you'll want to select the Flash/HTML5 player option. If your project includes a quiz or a table of contents, then you'll need to use one of the Flash options. There are other options down here that may be better if you're going to be embedding your video in a PowerPoint, or if you want it to be accessible from iTunes for iPads and iPhones, which are not capable of playing a video produced using a Flash setting. In most cases, e-learning courses are shared online, so we'll select the recommended option of Flash/HTML5 player. And then I'll click Next to move on to the next step, which is to customize the player settings. You have a lot of options when it comes to the player, so we'll cover that in detail in the next video in this section. For now, we'll leave the player at the default settings and move on to the next step of the publishing process by clicking Next. From here you can customize video options like adding a video title and author information using the Options button, or you can do things like add a watermark or customize the HTML options. So let's click Next to move on to the next step of the publishing process. Because this example project has markers inserted for a table of contents, we're brought to options for producing the table of contents. All of these options are covered in detail in the last video of section 6. We've already covered this, so we'll go ahead and click Next to move on to the next step. This example project also has quiz questions included, so we're brought to options for reporting quiz results. If you're using Camtasia to create an e-learning course, then the SCORM option is important to learn about, especially if you'll be using a learning management system like Moodle or Blackboard. We'll be covering the SCORM options in more detail later in this section of the course. For now, we'll click Next to move on to the last step of the publishing process, which is to select the output file name and location. Make sure to give your project a descriptive file name without any special characters, and pay close attention to the folder that you're saving it in. You can choose to publish it to the folder that you're saving all of your project files in, or the Camtasia folder that was created when you installed it. And you also have the post-production options, which will allow you to view the production results and preview your video once it's done publishing. You can even use Camtasia to upload your project files to a website using FTP if you're familiar with using FTP and have the server access necessary. When you're ready to start the publishing process, you can go ahead and click the Finish button to publish your project. Okay, and that sums up your options and the overall process of publishing a project in Camtasia Studio. You have a lot of options that make it possible to produce your project in different formats based on how you'll be sharing your project. If you're unsure of what settings to choose, then I recommend using one of the preset options to produce it as an MP4 or post it on screencast.com or YouTube. Now it's time to practice what you've learned by publishing a project. It's okay if you haven't finished working on it or if it's just a practice project, because you can publish your project as many times as you'd like. Try choosing some of the different formats available in custom production settings to see everything available to you. In the next section, we'll go over how to customize the player control bar in your project to give it a custom look and feel. If you're going to be uploading your published files to a personal website, content management system, or learning management system, then you may need to include a player when publishing so that users have options to play, pause, skip forward, or rewind the project. You'll also need to make sure you include the player if you have created a table of contents for your project. In this video, we'll go over all of your options for customizing the player so you have full control over the options your learners have for using your video. Customizing the player is generally done when you're ready to publish your project, so the player settings are accessible by going to the Produce and Share option. From here we'll need to open the drop-down menu and select Custom Production Settings. If we select these other presets, we won't be able to make customizations, or the player may not even be included. And then after selecting Custom Production Settings, we'll click the Next button, and it'll bring us to this screen where we can select the format. We covered the various options for formats in the previous video, but it's important to know that if you're including a player, you should select the recommended option of Flash/HTML5 player. I'll leave the recommended option selected, and then I'll click the Next button to access my player settings. As you can see, there's several tabs with various settings for your player. We'll start off on the Controller tab, where we can customize the look of the player. You'll definitely want to make sure the Produce with Controller option is selected, or the player won't be included in the published project. You also have options to auto-hide the player controls until the user hovers their mouse over it, and the option to auto-pause the project at the beginning so that the user is required to press play to start it. The Controller Theme drop-down menu will allow you to choose from several built-in themes that can dramatically change the look of your project. By default, the Transparent theme is selected, which is a nice looking theme, but you'll also have these other themes available if you want to change the look. Something great is that you can preview how the various themes will look by selecting a different theme and then previewing it here to see how it looks. And the last couple of options we have here are the Controller tab, will allow you to select the thumbnail image that you'd like displayed in the background prior to it playing, and allow you to select what you'd like to happen when the video is done playing. The Controller tab is where you access most of the options used to customize the look of the player, but you also have options to adjust the size of the video, adjust video settings if you're an advanced user, adjust audio settings, and also configure other options such as a table of contents or captions if you have them included in your project. And then once you're done selecting your player settings, you can preview it using the preview option in the lower left, or if you're ready to publish the project, you can go ahead and click the next button. Okay, and that sums up your options for customizing the look and navigation options of the player for your project. This is a great way to give your project a polished look and feel. Practice what you've learned by publishing a project with a customized player. Try testing out some of the different themes to get an idea of all of the options available to you. In the next video, we'll go over how to publish your project and share them on sites like YouTube and screencasts.com. YouTube makes it real easy to share videos with your students without having to worry about the technicalities of uploading and embedding your project to a personal website or content management system. In this video, I'll show you how to publish your project with the ideal settings for YouTube, then upload it directly to your YouTube account from within Camtasia using the Share to YouTube production option. Once your video is uploaded to YouTube, there's options to delete or hide your video in case it's not ready to be accessed by your students. Before you'll be able to share your video on YouTube, you'll need to make sure you have an account that you can log in with. If you don't already have a YouTube account, you can create one for free by going to youtube.com and selecting the option to create an account. Once you're ready to publish your project, and you have an account for YouTube, you can start the process by going to Produce and Share, then open the drop-down menu and select the Share to YouTube option, and then we'll click the Next button. After clicking Next, you'll be prompted to enter your YouTube name and password. After logging in with your name and password, you can enter the title and the description for your video. Make sure you use something descriptive that can be found in a YouTube search if necessary. And it's also a good idea to enter some tags, which are descriptive keywords, and to select a category for it so that it's easier to find. And the last option to select here is whether you'd like it to be public or private. It's recommended that you make it public so your students don't run into problems finding your video, but you can make it private if necessary. You also have the option of adjusting the privacy settings for your video after it's been uploaded to YouTube. Once all this information has been entered, we can start the publishing process by clicking the Finish button. After you click the Finish button, you'll see progress bars that indicate its progress towards publishing the project and uploading it to YouTube. Once the process is complete, your video will automatically open in YouTube in your computer's default browser. It'll take some time for the video to process and be available to view, but it shouldn't be too long. You want to make sure that your video doesn't include any copyrighted content, or YouTube may take it down or place ads on the uploaded video. After it's been uploaded to YouTube, it's a good idea to check YouTube settings for your video by clicking on the edit icon that you see here. From here you can edit the title, description, and privacy settings for your project, and you also have access to a lot more great features provided by YouTube. If this is your first time using YouTube to share videos, I'd recommend exploring the options you see here so you can see all that's available to you. And then once you're done editing the settings, you can click Save, and once your video is done processing, you can share the URL with your students, or use YouTube's share options to share it through social networking sites, or even embed it in a website, blog, or LMS. And that's how easy it is to produce and share your video on YouTube directly from within Camtasia. If you're looking for an easy way to quickly share your videos with your students, then the Share to YouTube setting may be the perfect option for you. You can practice this by sharing a video on YouTube. It's okay if it's not done yet. You can easily delete it once you're done with it on YouTube. After it's uploaded to YouTube, test out some of the settings available to you from within the YouTube Video Manager. In the next section, we'll go over how to publish your project as a SCORM package for an LMS. If you're using a learning management system like Moodle or Blackboard, then you can take advantage of the SCORM reporting settings in Camtasia so that you'll be able to track progress or quiz results using your learning management system's reporting features. If you've been around the e-learning industry for a while, then I'm sure you've heard of the term SCORM, which is an acronym for Sharable Content Object Reference Model. This can be a complicated topic, but it's important to not be intimidated by SCORM because you don't need to know the ins and outs in order to take advantage of its reporting features with your LMS. In this video, we'll cover the basics of how you can publish your project as a SCORM package using Camtasia's features so that you can take advantage of reporting within your LMS without having to worry about all of the complicated technical details. This video will not cover the process of uploading the SCORM package to an LMS due to the fact that this process is different depending on what LMS you're using. When it comes to uploading and configuring the SCORM package for your LMS, I'd recommend searching the packed website or checking with the LMS supplier for resources. When it comes to SCORM reporting, you have a couple of different options. You can configure the SCORM settings to report quiz scores, or if you're not including any quizzes, then you can track how far or how long they watched the video for. We'll cover both of these options so you can develop an understanding of the different ways you can use SCORM to give credit for completing your e-learning course. Once you've got your project ready to publish, we can go ahead and configure the SCORM settings by going to Produce and Share, then selecting Custom Production Settings from the drop-down menu, and then we'll click Next. Now we'll need to make sure that we have the recommended option of Flash HTML5 selected as the format, otherwise we won't be able to take advantage of the SCORM reporting options if we use any of these other options. Next we can continue through the production wizard until we get to the quiz reporting options. If you want to take advantage of your learning management system's SCORM reporting features, then you'll need to make sure that you select the Report Quiz Results using SCORM option. If you do not have access to an LMS, then having the results reported through email is a good option, but you probably don't want to have both options selected. After selecting the option Report Quiz Results using SCORM, we'll click the SCORM Options button to enter information about the project that can be reported to the LMS. Starting at the top, we have the Identifier field, which is used to identify this project in the LMS reporting system. Unless you have a specific identifier you'd like to use, I recommend leaving this as is so you can be sure it's a unique number. Next we have the title, description, and subject, which are optional, but it's a good idea to enter something so that it's easy to distinguish your project from others when looking at your LMS's SCORM reports. However, not all LMSs will read this information, so it may not be needed depending on what LMS you're using. The next step is to select the version of SCORM you'd like to use. This is an important field to pay attention to as different LMSs recognize different versions of SCORM. Make sure to check the documentation for your LMS to ensure you're selecting the correct version. SCORM 1.2 is more widely accepted among learning management systems, so I'll go ahead and select that for this example. Next we'll add a title in the lesson information section, which is also optional, but it may make it easier to read the reports depending on which LMS you're using. Our last settings to configure are the SCORM package options, which allow you to choose whether you'd like the files to be packaged as a zip file, unzipped, or both. Most LMSs require that the files be in a zip package, so we'll leave it selected at the default option. Okay, now that we've got our SCORM options configured, we'll click OK, and then we'll click Next to continue with the publishing process. Once the publishing process is complete, click the Open Production Folder button that you see here, and you'll be taken to the folder on your computer where the zip package is saved, and this is what you'll need to upload to your LMS. If you chose to also publish unzipped files, then you'll see those here as well, but the zip package is what needs to be uploaded. At this point, the process for creating the zip SCORM package is complete, and you'll need to check for resources specific to your LMS for support uploading it and configuring it in your LMS. Okay, that sums up the process for configuring SCORM options and producing a zipped SCORM package ready for your LMS. If you need help configuring the SCORM package on your LMS, make sure to check the packed website or with your LMS vendor for resources. Now it's time to practice what you've learned by publishing a zipped SCORM package. Try publishing your project with a quiz where you give credit for completion based off of their quiz score, and also try a project without a quiz and give credit for completing a certain percentage of the project. If you have access to upload the package to your LMS, make sure to test it out so you can see if the SCORM reporting settings are working correctly. In the next section we'll go over some extra tips that will help you use Camtasia with other e-learning authoring tools, and also embed Camtasia projects in web pages. Camtasia is fantastic for creating videos and screencasts, but there may be times where your e-learning project could be improved by taking advantage of the features available in other e-learning authoring tools. In this video, I'll show you how to get the best of both worlds by using Camtasia videos with two of the most popular e-learning authoring tools, Articulate Storyline and Adobe Captivate. Before you can insert your Camtasia video into a Storyline or a Captivate project, you'll need to publish it without the player. There's no need for the player because you won't be able to use it in Storyline or Captivate, and you can add player control options after they've been inserted. So we'll go ahead and publish this video by going to Produce and Share, And then we'll need to open the drop-down menu and select one of the MP4 only publishing options. You can select the MP4 only 720p option because it's a higher quality than the 480p option. Now you can go ahead and click Next so that you can enter a title for the video and also select the folder that you want it to be published to. Okay, now I can go ahead and click Finish to start the publishing process. And then now that it's done, I can open up the production folder where I'll see my MP4 that I'll be able to embed in Storyline or Captivate. Let's start by going over the process of inserting Camtasia videos into Storyline. Now that your video is published as an MP4, it's easy to insert into an articulate Storyline slide using the Insert Video option. You'll just need to go to the slide that you want to insert the video on, and then select the Insert tab, and then you'll see the Insert Video option here. For this example, we'll go with the more common method using the MP4 file, and then navigating to and selecting the Camtasia MP4 file. Okay, now that the video is inserted into the slide, you have some options here in Storyline to customize its appearance on the Format tab. Because the Camtasia video was published without a player, you may want to select this option to show video controls, so that your learners have the ability to pause the video. Another commonly used option on the Format tab is the options to change the size. If you're going to have text or graphics on the slide with the video, you may need to make the video smaller so that you can fit it. Okay, now that we've got the Camtasia video inserted into the slide, you can preview it to make sure it's working correctly, and also looks good by selecting the preview option to preview this slide. It looks good and works great. Now that you know how to insert videos into Storyline, let's talk about how to do the same thing in Captivate. So I'll go into my Captivate project. I'm going to add a new slide to the project for my Camtasia video. And when using Captivate, a great option they have that makes it easy to insert video or other types of content on the slide is the Insert Slide From option, which is available from here on the Insert menu. After selecting Insert Slide From, you'll need to choose what type of content layout you'd like. Any of these options that say Content will make it easy for you to add videos or other types of media to your project. For this example, we just want to add a video with a title above it, so we can select the Content Center option. Okay, now that we've got the slide inserted, you can see we have this handy content wheel that has this option to insert a video. So I'll go ahead and click on that, and it'll open the Import Video window. From here we have options to import the video directly from our computer, or you can insert it from a URL just like with Storyline. It can be less space intensive, and sometimes quicker to load if you simply enter the URL, but for this example we'll go with the more common method of importing it from our computer. So we'll choose that option, then click the Browse button, and then we'll navigate to the folder on my computer where I have my Camtasia video saved. Okay, here's the video, so we can go ahead and select that to be imported into the slide. Then click OK, and voila, the video is added. From here you can add any text to the slide and make any adjustments necessary to the timeline. Okay, and that sums up the process for using Camtasia videos in combination with two of the most popular e-learning authoring tools, Articulate Storyline and Adobe Captivate. Inserting Camtasia videos into Storyline or Captivate projects is a great way to take advantage of Camtasia's video editing features, along with the great features available in Storyline and Captivate. If you have access to Articulate Storyline or Adobe Captivate, you can practice what you've learned by publishing a Camtasia video, then inserting it into an Articulate Storyline or Captivate project. If you have access to other e-learning authoring tools such as Lectora, you may be able to apply the same principles covered in this video to Lectora as well. In the next video we'll go over how to embed your videos in web pages or content and learning management systems such as WordPress and Moodle. Once you finish developing your Camtasia video, you have a lot of options for sharing it on a website. Any web designer can tell you there's a variety of ways you can do this using embed codes or iframes, but if you're not an experienced web designer, then you may want to go with the easier method of uploading it to YouTube and then using the embed code provided by YouTube. In this video, we'll go over how to embed the video in a web page using the embed code provided by YouTube. If you watch the Publishing to YouTube video in Section 7, then you know that Camtasia makes it easy to publish your video and have it automatically uploaded to YouTube using the Share to YouTube option in the Produce and Share menu. If you haven't watched that video, then I recommend going back and watching that before continuing. Once your video has been published and uploaded to YouTube, you can find the embed code that will make it easy to share on a website by going to the video on YouTube, and then selecting the Share option located beneath the video, and then we'll need to select the Embed option. From here you can select the size that you'd like your video embedded using this drop-down menu. And then after selecting the size, you can simply copy and paste this embed code into a website. The process for pasting the embed code can vary depending on what type of website it is you're using. If it's a traditional website, then you can open the HTML file using an editor like Adobe Dreamweaver, or for this example we'll use Notepad because that's a program available on most computers. After opening the HTML file, you can copy and paste the YouTube embed code somewhere within the body tag. And depending on what other content is on the page, you may want to put it further down in a div, or if you want it in a different section on the page. Okay, now you'll just need to update your website with the new HTML file and you'll be set. Nowadays, it's more common and easier to edit websites using content management systems such as WordPress or learning management systems such as Moodle. If you're using WordPress, you can copy and paste the embed code into the HTML text editor, or you can make it even easier on yourself by using a plugin. If you'll be adding several videos to a WordPress site, I'd recommend installing a plugin so that it's a quick and easy process for each video. If you're using an LMS like Moodle, then you can simply copy and paste the embed code into the HTML editor anywhere that you're able to add text. For example, if you want to post it here on the front page of this Moodle site, you'll need to turn editing on, then click edit in this area with the text. Then after clicking edit, you'll be able to access the HTML editor by clicking this icon here. And now you can just paste the embed code. The best part about using a content or a learning management system is that you don't need to know the code and you don't need to worry about placing it under the body tag. You can just select where on the page you'd like it to appear and then paste the code. Simple as that. And now I can just click save and there's my Camtasia video. Simple as that. Okay, that sums up the process for embedding Camtasia videos in web pages using the YouTube embed code. There's many other methods for doing this that don't require you to upload the video to YouTube, but this is the easiest process to share your video on a website without knowing a lot about the HTML code. Practice publishing a Camtasia video to YouTube and then sharing it on your website. If you don't currently have access to a website, I'd recommend looking into management systems like WordPress or Moodle that make it easier than a traditional website. This ends the Camtasia for e-learning video course. After completing this course, you should be ready to take full advantage of all the great features in Camtasia that will help take your e-learning courses to the next level.